Greetings, friends. Welcome to today's devotional. It is Psalm 76. In Judah, God is known. His name is great in Israel. His abode has been established in Salem, his dwelling place in Zion. There he broke the flashing arrows, the shield, the sword, and the weapons of war. Glorious are you, more majestic than the everlasting mountains. The stout-hearted were stripped of their spoil. They sank into sleep. None of the troops was able to lift a hand. At your rebuke, O God of Jacob, both rider and horse lay stunned. But you indeed are awesome. Who can stand before you when once your anger is aroused? From the heavens you uttered judgment. The earth feared and was still. When God rose to establish judgment, to save all the oppressed of the earth, human wrath serves only to praise you. When you bind the last bit of your wrath around you, make vows to the Lord your God and perform them. Let all who are around him bring gifts to the one who is awesome, who cuts off the spirit of princes and who inspires fear in the kings of the earth. Well, so this psalm is clearly, I think, in a reference to war, to the battles and victories that Israel fought against their enemies in establishing their home in the Promised Land, overtaking the Canaanites and the various tribes that were there by the power of, with God's absolute help in that. And he is being praised for the victories that he has brought to the people of Israel, and naturally so. In the history of the Israelites, when God commanded them to go to war, they were always victorious. When they decided on their own to attack another people, they were always soundly defeated. They were always the underdog, one way or another, but without God's help, they stood no chance in defeating the enemies. And just a side note, verse 10 has probably maybe stood out to you, that human wrath serves only to praise you. When you bind the last bit of your wrath around you. That's a really difficult translation, at least according to the my study Bible, that it's really hard to translate from the Hebrew to English, and it could very well mean that God's wrath against humanity is something that praises him, which in and of itself is a difficult thing to undertake when God is being wrathful, as he often was in the Old Testament against the people of Israel or the Israelites' enemies. But it is a byproduct of God's righteousness and judgment. And so, even though it's hard for us to deal with that, that's balanced out by God's goodness and his grace as well. But anyways, getting back to the idea of war and the fighting of wars by the people of Israel, truly God's power is on display in these battles. As I said, they were always outnumbered and always outarmed, and they stood zero chance against some of these people that they've battled against. If you've ever read the Old Testament, and it's always worth reading Chronicles or Kings, great books that tell really amazing, but sometimes kind of difficult, violent stories about how God helped his people. But just the idea that God was that involved with the people of Israel and that his will was being accomplished, and that is the reason why things went the way they did. He wasn't going to be defeated, and his will was not going to be changed, and his plan for humanity was not going to be usurped by any of the enemies of Israel. God knew what he was doing, always does know what he's doing, and so he intervened in people's lives, in the life of the Israelites, to accomplish what it was that he wished to accomplish. And though it's again hard for us to relate to that in the context of war, because we don't fight these holy wars anymore. No war of today can be considered holy like it was thousands of years ago. But it does reveal that God's intimate involvement in the lives of people on this earth, groups of people and individuals as well, and his things are always going to go according to God's will, which doesn't mean that we're all being moved around and doing things based on God being sort of the puppet master in all of this, because God can work within our free will to accomplish what he needs to, but oftentimes will intervene. And oftentimes when he does intervene, we're not even aware of it. And that is just, I mean, it's a characteristic of who God is, that his will is going to come to pass regardless of whether we join in or not. But it's always much better for us and much better for our world when we are obedient to what it is that God's doing, when we have that deep connection with him and abiding in his will and trusting in him when his will seems to be something quite unpleasant in our lives. But we have to pull back and always trust that God has a plan and a bigger picture of what is happening in this world, because God does have a plan. There is an end game to all of this, and that is Christ returning and salvation for all, and the final judgment for people who had believed and people who have denied God. And that's eventually going to happen. God's world has already happened because he's not bound by time, but his power and his will are unmatched. And like I said, even though it's difficult for us sometimes when it's unpleasant to accept in that, there is some comfort in knowing that God is not changed, or his plans aren't thwarted by human beings, by the creation. So his power and his might on display for all of the people of Israel to see, and still today, but in quite a different context. And in the context of the cross and of love and of the sacrifice of Jesus, it has been softened incredibly so, that God's will being done included his sacrifice on our behalf. So praise God for his power, his might, his authority, and all of those things, and know that he is with you, watching over you, and he is deeply and intimately involved in your life. That's our devotion for today. Until tomorrow on Psalm 77, be blessed.